We'll do a review of Likutei Sichos in Chelek Yud Zayin, volume 17, the second Sicha for the Parshas Metzora. The Rebbe explains here a Rashi Sicha, and the Rebbe brings into light, like amazingly, Rashi quotes a Toras Kohanim. And one is inclined, and the Mefarshim and the Rebbe starts off that way, that the Rebbe is trying to say the quote of the Toras Kohanim, which Rashi quotes. But the Rebbe's argument is that actually, if Rashi wanted to say what the Toras Kohanim is saying, he would have quoted it. Rashi just writes B'chulu, and he doesn't write it. And the Rebbe comes up brilliantly to explain that Rashi means something else, not the same idea that is in Toras Kohanim, just brings the Toras Kohanim for sort of extra support. But Rashi actually means something different than what it seems on this surface. And that's the Pshutei Shel Mikra. That's literally to learn and understand the Rashi, why Rashi brings down what he doesn't bring down, why he brings down what he does bring down. Everything is precise, everything is accurate, specific, and as we learn with the Rebbe's beer, everything falls into place. So let's go inside. At the end, there will also be a Yenu Shel Torah, Heira, and Avodas Hashem from this psukim and this Rashi. Aleph. In Pasuk Ukli Cheres Asher Yiga Boi Hazov. So we're talking about the tumas of a zov, that if a person who has a flow, a bodily flow, which renders him tameh, he becomes a zov. So if he touches, says the pasuk, earthenware, now of course we know earthenware you cannot tovel. If earthenware become tameh, then you have to break them. So the pasuk says, "Ukli cheres asher yiga boi hazov," the zov who is the av hatuma, if he touches the kelim have to be broken. You break them if it's a kli cheres. If it's, on the other hand, the klol kli eitz, if it's a wooden vessel, a vessel made out of wood, you can immerse in the mikveh. Yishotev b'mayim, should be rinsed in water, meaning you put it in the mikveh, and once you put it through the mikveh, it becomes toher. So kli cheres has to be broken because there's no tara, there's no immersion, no mikveh help for a kli cheres, and the kli eitz yishotev b'mayim. So, stellt sich Rashi, if the Werter ukli cheres asher yiga boi hazov, a kli cheres that the zov will touch. Rashi explained, what does it mean touch? Yachel afilu noga boi ma'achayrav b'chulu. Might think that touching here means you touch it from the back. You have a vessel, and you touch it from the back versus the inside of the vessel, but you touch it from the back. So you might think that this should be tamei as well by the kli cheres. Kedisa b'teres kohanim. Now the Rashi doesn't tell you the discussion. It just says as it says in Toras Kohanim. The very simple way we learn it, as we'll see, the Rebbe changes it around later on. As we see in the Toras Kohanim, over there is a whole discussion. Can a kli cheres be metame if you touch it from the back? Usually we learned earlier and we'll learn later that a kli cheres is only metame metoiche from the inside. And earthenware cannot be metame if we're touching from the back. So Rashi is asking the same thing as the Toras Kohanim is deliberating. Maybe if you touch it from the back, it should be tamei. And Rashi doesn't bring down the proof. How do we know not? He just says v'chulu, etc. Doesn't bring down any of the details. It just says kidi iso b'teres kohanim, as we find in Toras Kohanim. And then Rashi tells you, go up till ezehu magoy shehu kikuloi. What is the touch when we say asher yiga boy? You'll touch it. But the fact it says Yiga boy, you touch him, you touch sort of the whole keli. The Rebbe will elaborate later on. Normally when you touch a area in the keli. But what is Yiga boy touching the whole keli? So Ezeu Magoy Shuhu Kuloi. So which kind of touch would be like touching the whole thing? That is causing the keli to move. Hesed means when you don't actually touch it with your hands, but you are the cause for the movement of the keli. If the keli moves due to your act, that means hesed, and then actually you're touching the entire keli. I'm giving away a little bit from the Rebbe's explanation later on, but we can already help us over here to mean have okay. So darf man verstehen. So we need to understand was is doch schwer in Pshuter shel Mikra. So what's difficulty in the simple meaning of the pasuk? Was live them is Rashi mefarish the werter yigachul. Rashi explains the words. What does it mean? Yigaboy, what does it mean, Yigaboy? So what's the problem? And Rashi explains it. To say that here doesn't mean you touch, here it means you move it. Hesed. Unit as Yiga, says Yiga, Chulis Kipshote. Why don't we say Kipshote? Adus meant Nigia, that this means touching. Unyada Nigia, Afilu Ma'achayrov. And even means from the back. Why doesn't Rashi learn that? So that's something which we understand based upon what we already learned before, it seems. It seems like based on what we learned before that a klicheres is not metame ma'achoyrov, so therefore we have a problem in translating it, touching it from the back, and therefore we have to explain that it's moving the kid. Is the hasbara in them? So what is the explanation? I can don't need taich as yiga. Yiga boy. What does it mean, yiga boy? Main negia mamish means actual touching. About as much in Freyer in Parsha Shmini by Tumas Sheres, because already earlier, the portion of Shmini, when the Torah discusses the impurity of an insect, so over there we had the ribbon we learned out. Rashi Zogdort, as Rashi states over there, as ein klicheres metame elam avirei, that a klicheres, an earthenware, cannot be metame only from its ear. A sheretz that will touch, which is also an avatuma, but a sheretz that will touch a keli on the side of it is not going to be metame. Only if you hold the sheretz on the inside of the area of the cup. If you put a string and hold the sheretz inside, or touch it in the inside, but it's only from the inside that will be metame. Enkel is metame elam avire. Only from the inside area of the keli. On the river, kemen shadoni taichen. So therefore, we can't touch here. As vikli cheres, asher yigaboy means. So tomaven duchanegi machoydev, that it should become to touching from the back. Okay, so that seems pretty straightforward evidence. So why would we need any proof? So we have an issue. We don't need the teres kahanim. We can just say, Yochel, you might think that you can touch it to be tummy, but that's not possible because there's a pasuk. But one can still make a distinction between the tumas sheretz that we learned in Parsha Shmini and the tumas zov, because the tumas zov is more stringent in certain halachas than the tumas sheretz. The tumas zov we learn in the Parsha is metame mishkav u'moishav. If it's a place that the zov sits on or a place that he lies on, over there is tuma. Everything that is underneath him, everything is on the mishkav, anything in the moishav. This is an additional level of tumah without touching, without moving, but just being over it is already metame. That's only by zov, not by sheretz. So one can think that maybe that's why sheretz zov has an additional stringency. You can touch it also. Maybe even though it doesn't work by sheretz, maybe it'll work by zov. So therefore, when the Riber Kemesh since, however, we could make a distinction over here. Dafke dort and by Tumas Sheretz was is Atuma Kala, specifically by Tumas Sheretz, that's called a light level of Tuma, is Enkli Cheres Metame Elamaviroi. Over there, perhaps we're going to say that the halacha is that the earthenware will not become tamei only from the inside. That's by a sheretz, which is light, which is not the tamei mishkav emotion. Mashenke by tumas zov was a tuma chamura, as opposed to tumas zov, which is the tuma of a flow. Over there is a serious tuma. It is metame mishkav emotion. It is also metame on the sitting, on the chair, on the place that he lies, or on the seat that he sits on. It has to be designated for Merkav Moshe. So maybe we'll say, maybe over here it could become Tomei by touching from the back. Maybe it means literally touching it, because this is different than Sheretz. And therefore, in order to caution us that we should not accept this distinction, and we need to caution us not to accept the distinction, because literally it would be better to say Yiga means touching, as everywhere it means touching. Especially this is more fitting to the simple meaning of the pasuk, that it means touching. Is Rashi might take from pasuk, so therefore Rashi quotes from the verse. Rashi quotes in the beginning, in this heading of the verse, Rashi quotes in the pasuk not just the word Yigaboy, but he said, which is Yigaboy, also the words that make, they point out, they stand out to us, the difference, that here we're talking about Kli Cheres, Asher Yigaboy Hazov, Kli Cheres, that's why Rashi's heading is Kli Cheres, Asher Yigaboy Hazov. So maybe over here, even if you touch it from the back, because here we're talking about the tumah of Azov, not tumah sheret, so it could be different, and maybe. And on the Rashi answers, what does the Teres Kohanim Taka say? The Rebbe quotes here, what is the Hamshech of Teres Kohanim? Is Bedinu. That it's a kal v'chomer. It's a kal v'chomer that a zov cannot be metame through negia. You cannot be metame keli with negia from the back. A kli cheres cannot be metame from the back. It's a kal v'chomer from mace. What's the kal v'chomer? Because the same thing like we learned earlier in Shmini about a sheretz, that a sheretz by kli cheres is metame only from the inside, not the outside. The same thing is by a mace as well. Later on in the pasuk, even we see, since we see that even the more serious of tuma, which is a mace, why is a mace chomer? A mace you have to sprinkle from the ashes of the Ever Pora Aduma, and it's also of the Avaisa tuma. There's stringency in the mace, still. By a mace, you are not being metame the earthenware from the back. By a mace, the mace will also metame the klicheres only from the inside. So since we see that even the mace, which is chomer then zov, we are not metame klicheres from the outside and the inside, hazov hakal, so therefore the lighter tuma, which is the zov, which doesn't have the stringency of tumas mes. Isn't it a foratory? Isn't it a kal v'chomer? It's not going to be metame klicheres in the back. But the Teres Kohanim goes back and he says, well, but in one way, a Zov is more chamur. In one area, Zov is more chamur than Tumas Meis. Because the din of Mishkav and Moshev is only by a Zav. It does not apply to Tumas Meis. A Meis on the Mishkav and on the Moshev is not going to be Metame over the Merkav and the Moshev. So, therefore, maybe the Teres Kohanim goes back and says, Lo im amarta b'meis. Maybe by a meis you said that it cannot be Metame only from inside. It doesn't make Mishkav Moshev. Talmud Leimar. So that's why in the end we learn it out. So we don't have a proof from Mace, and that's why we learn it out from Gzeir Shavet. The pasuk says Zirashir Yigaboy Ulhalon Hoimer Asher Tevushal Boy, and later on by the Tumas Mace it says that also the word boy. Tushal boy, we have boy from Gzeir Shavet. My boy ha'amur lahalon me'avirei, just like the boy that is written by the mace, it's only me'avirei. Avkam me'avirei is only me'avirei. So we have a Gzeir Shavet. So, okay. So we're saying that we know that it doesn't mean here. Yigaboy doesn't mean here touching from the back, because we have a Gzeir Shavet. That's it, because we don't have a Kal V'chomer, because we were saying that the Zav is in one area and Mishkav Moshe more Chomer than Meis, so therefore we don't have a Kal V'chomer, and we don't learn it from Sheretz, so we therefore have a Gzeir Shavet. That's where we learned it from. But then, so we still have a problem. So what does it mean? If you say Vertok the Shaila, so then if it's not Metame from the back, so what does it mean we'll touch it? It was made Yigaboy. So what does it mean touching? Touching means it's translated normally by the back. One of them brings Rashi, them sim from Teres Kohanim. That's what Rashi brings, the end of the Teres Kohanim. Ezo magoy shehu kikuloi. So what would constitute a maga that would be like touching the whole keli? That means moving the keli. So when it says Yigaboy will touch it, would mean touch the whole keli all at once. So basically, Rashi doesn't bring down over here from the Teres Kohanim the necessary drasha to reject that it doesn't mean actually touching. So for that, he leaves it. He says like it says in Teres Kohanim. Okay, maybe because it's a little bit complicated, so Rashi says, okay, trust the Teres Kohanim for that. But why does Rashi not just either rely on the Teres Kohanim? He brings down, he starts off, and then he says, like in Teres Kohanim, brings the end. Let's look inside, base. We have to understand either way. Oder Rashi had gedarft in mighty sein dem Teres Kohanim in Ganzen. He should have either quoted totally Teres Kohanim. Euch the Raya, also the evidence. Asher Yigach boy can it mean Machayra? It doesn't mean Machayra because we have a Gzeir Shavet, as Rashi's breakdown. Und over Rashi verlässt sich am Metalei noch gucken Teres Kohanim. If Rashi relies that you will, on your own, you're going to go check out what it says in Teres Kohanim, hat euch nicht gedacht, mighty sein, them see, we shouldn't have also quoted the end, Ezo Magoy V'chulu. What does it mean? Touching. That it means the whole Kela has it. Not only because I Pirish with the vertical, he's with Teres Kohanim. Should have just said, as we find in Teres Kohanim. Valderech Pirush in Parshas Vayikra, similar to as Rashi explained in the section of Vayikra. Of there, Rashi said, if you think it's an extra pasuk unnecessary, so Rashi says, it was expounded in Teres Kohanim, so that should be the end. So why does Rashi bring the end? Either bring the whole Teres Kohanim, or bring nothing of the Teres Kohanim, just say like a Teres Kohanim. Why does Rashi bring part of it? So the Pasha will make Kefer answer. So one can answer. Those was Rashi bring the B'sima Zemagoy. Why does Rashi bring this end of the Teres Kohanim B'chulu? Is Valdermit is gegeben der Teich for Yigaboy Hesed, because Rashi wants to still translate what does it mean that you touch it. Rashi wants to say how are you touching it? So he says Hesed is touching it. The earlier discussion of the Teres Kohanim was that is limud v'raya, but there it's merely we're trying to learn out and evidence as the part in which we're trying to learn out that it's not Rashi leaves out. The Rebbe bringt es nicht verlässt Rashi doesn't bring it down, and he relies as we betalein ma'ayin zayin in Teres Kohanim, you look in the Teres Kohanim. But to teach you the word yiga, he has to bring down the Teres Kohanim to tell you how yiga, and therefore Rashi brings this down. The Rebbe says this is difficult to pshat, and it seems like Rashi is not really using the evidence of the Teres Kohanim, because if that was Rashi's proof, Rashi would have said that. Rashi doesn't say, because it says Gzeira Shava, that's how we know it. If Rashi meant and one, he would have brought down Teres Kohanim over here. So it's hard to say so. But we get come upon him, because we already spoken many times. Everything necessary to understanding the simple meaning of the verse. Rashi brings it out clearly for a 5-year-old. And very explicit. Since the meaning of Yigaboy could potentially mean touching with the back, but the Rashi should have written clearly that what is the idea? What is the why shouldn't we not? What forces us to tell us that it doesn't mean the Yiga? When it follows and not rely, I'm going to look in the Teres Kohanim, the one is going to look at so. Ubefrat as the Teres Kohanim lemt itself an Gzeira Shava. It's not like it's a poshtim shad, an idea that the Teres Kohanim says. There's a Gzeira Shava. Or not from pashtak shava, not simple meaning. So it's not something that one can really figure out. So therefore the Rebbe says, Muzman zogen as leibshuter shal mikra is the raya. Where is the proof? Nit for the Gzeira Shava boy boy. That's not the evidence for Rashi that it doesn't mean touching from the back. Was wird nicht gebracht, because that is not brought in Pirush Rashi. That's not the evidence. Nor from the Werter was Rashi is mighty be Pirush from Teres Kohanim. Those were that Rashi proved. That is Rashi's proof that it doesn't mean touching from the back is because Eza who has a boy is the Yiga boy is Hesed. Those was not the Chulu. This is what Rashi does say, etc. As in Teres Kohanim is not L'Teishus Rayu Bir. This is only for additional proof. More explanation will come on, as the Rebbe will explain later on. And therefore, is there a mistake with the Rebbe's v'chulu? This with Teres Kohanim. That's why Rashi is satisfied just with the hint saying etc. as the Teres Kohanim, because Rashi actually doesn't mean the proof itself. If the proof was Rashi's, if the Teres Kohanim Gzeira Shava boy boy was the proof that it doesn't mean that it's not touching it, like the Teres Kohanim said, the Rashi would have brought that. Rashi has a different proof that Yiga boy doesn't mean touching the whole. That doesn't mean touching the back, and that's from the Teres Kohanim. What he does call it. It just says L'chulu is the Teres Kohanim over there, but that's not his Gimel. So maybe we should say Where do we know it? As we learned this often to space. How do we know? We don't need the Gzeir Shava boy, like it says in the Teres Kohanim at the end, but like he starts off, that we learn it out from the Tumas Meis. Tumas Meis is not Metame Me'achayre, which is a more serious. Which is also a very strict Tuma. In other words, it has like Sheretz. Sheretz is strict because it's more strict than, Zov, like a Zov, which is more strict than Sheretz because Zov is Metame Me'achayre, but mace is a very strong tumor. It's for 7 days, and it's the sprinkling of the ashes, various different things. And yet, it does not make a klicheres tummy from the back. We met vital and in Parshas Chukas, as we're going to learn later on in Parshas Chukas. Par statement therefore. So from that we understand. That also a zav who is not as stringent as a mace is not metamakil. It doesn't. He cannot be metamakil a klicheres from the back. Und das ist kavanas Rashi mit Zeilen zum Teres Kohanim. So Rashi means to say to Teres Kohanim. Of course, the child doesn't know yet the posik in Parshas Chukas, but the Teres Kohanim quotes the posik in Chukas lechatchila. So he doesn't mean the Gzeir Shava, the conclusion of the Teres Kohanim, but then kavachoyma ze brings it down. It means the foretory, the kavachoyma that the Teres Kohanim brings down. Since a mace which is more stringent, does not make a klicheres tummy from the back. So a zav which is lighter, for sure should not be metamek klicheres from the back. This whole idea, kavachomer, is something which is a very simple logic, which fits in with the style of the simple meaning of the pasuk. So maybe that's what Rashi means by bringing the Teres Kohanim. Well, but the Teres Kohanim doesn't remain unagam as the Teres Kohanim frekt of them kalmachem. The Teres Kohanim challenges this kalmachem. Well, by Zovida achumra, because we find by Yasav also a stringency. So the way the Teres Kohanim says, we can't learn Zov from Tomei Meis because a Zov has a stringency that it's Matame, Mishka, and a Meis not. So we wouldn't have this evidence. So while this is challenged on the level of the Teres Kohanim, on the level of the learning, but in Pshut Shel Mikra, that's not really a challenge. Is da Chum Meis, Mishka, the Tomei Meis, which is my Meis. Meitas Nora Shkulim. So all what it means is that Tuma has a stringency over Tuma Zav. Tuma Zav has a stringency over Tumas Meis that it's Matame B'Mishka B'Moshe. As Yeder Eine, so they're equal. As Yeder Eine Hatachumra Legabim Tzveit. And therefore, Le'Pshut Shel Mikra is does Hatam as his own Zayin Shkulim. So therefore, they should also be equal. Oichen den Din for nit Matame Zakle Charisma. Not to be metamek lecheres ma'achayrav. So this would be the reasoning for, well, you can't say by the zav that it should be metame ma'achayrav, since the Tmei Meis is not metame ma'achayrav, and the fact that Tmei Meis is more stringent, but zav has a stringency. Okay, so it's not. It doesn't make it more stringent than Tmei Meis. Should be equal, so they should both not be metame. Maybe Rashi is that's what Rashi means. But so the main thing is that Rashi is trying to tell us that we're learning it out from the Tmei Meis. So basically, we're saying that Rashi is writing the Teres Kohanim to lead us to the pasuk in Chukas, which talks about the Tmei Meis not being Matame Ma'achayrav. So why does Rashi have to go to the Teres Kahanim and to bring the pasuk? Why does Rashi just go straight to the pasuk in Chokas? So if that's what the Rashi is proving, so the Rebbe is going to say, because this is more than just a pasuk, it's a whole limud. Dos was Rashi is mitzayin to Teres Kahanim. So why is Rashi pointing and referencing the Teres Kahanim? Onitzum pasuk pshuta shel mikra. Why isn't he use this simple verse, the pshuta shel mikra, in Parshas Chukas, and where it says that my mace is not metame from the back, while the Chochav pasuk, because to bring the proof of the pasuk, Aleph is verbunden mit an arichas. It's not so. It doesn't say so clearly. We have to. It's to prove it. It would be a lengthy proof. On was base, euch noch them. Even if Rashi brought down the proof that my mace is not metame machoidov, is nicht sicher as the Ben Chomesh wird verstehen in the boy of limud. It's not sure that he will properly understand that way we learn it out. In Teres Kahanim is the limud befedish ubepirit, but in Teres Kahanim this pasuk that we expound by Tmei Meis, it is very clear, it's very specific. So Rashi therefore brings the Teres Kahanim verse to bring the pasuk. But the Rebbe actually argues this doesn't really fit because if we're saying that the reason why it has to be a Tmei, Zov cannot be, has to match up, they have equal because they both have stringency, but we do see that there is a difference because the halacha is over here. Yigaboy means that is metame beheset, and a Tmei Meis is not metame beheset. Let's look aside. As this is not really hold out. It cannot really explain this. Besides the fact it's still not smooth. How come he doesn't write it very clearly instead of saying Teres Kahanim and meaning okay, it doesn't mean the Gzera Shava, it means the Kal Vachomer, it means Tmei Meis. Why doesn't Rashi just say it? Is Neishachlos in addition? Atome Meis is doch nit metame beheset. Tmei Meis is not metame beheset. Is oi meken zogen as der posik. So, what do we accomplish from the Tmei Meis that we can't say Asher Yigaboy? Means what? Means touching, regular touching, because then that would be more stringent Tmei Meis. So what does Asher Yigaboy mean? Asher Yigaboy means moving. So that's also a chiddush by Sheret, by Zov over Tmei Meis. So just like you're telling me here that a Tmei Azov can be metame more than a Tmei Meis because it can be metame beheset. So why shouldn't you say, learn from this post that it should be metame ma'achayro? Anyways, you're making it more stringent than Tmei Meis. The whole reason that we're saying now that you can't make sheretz metame ma'achayro because it can't be more stringent than Tmei Meis. So what are you saying? What does actually that does mean? It means that you're moving the kela, so you make it more stringent than Tmei Meis. A Tmei Meis is doch nit metame beheset. Tmei Meis does not make tamei by moving it. Is oi meken zogen. So if we could say as the posik asher yigaboy, this posik asher yigaboy, kum mechadesh zayin, is coming to give you this new idea, this novelty. As azov is metame beheset, that azav can make tamei by moving it. What is nitah by tumas meis, which does not exist. That does not make tamei by tumas meis through hesed. So why should we not say the same way as the chiddush in Yigaboy? Why do we have to go to Hesed? Why don't we say Yigaboy? By stating them, it consists in the fact that Zov is metamak lecheres ma'achayrav, that the Zov will be metamak. That's the chiddush, and that's what the pasuk is telling us. Because anyways, you're telling us that a Zav is more stringent beheset more than a tmei meis. We'll come to Chotz meis kenes nit metame sein. Why is that better? Und der Pirush darf sein, oh, this is a better Pirush. Weil Leute Davke wird man touching Yiga Boy Kipshote. Then Yiga Boy would mean literally. So can't say that is what Rashi means. How we know that it's not Yiga Boy Kipshote, because then it would be more stringent than at Tmei Meis. But you're saying then that it is more stringent. We should rather say that Yigaboy means regular touching, and it should be stringent. That's what Torah is Machadish. Then we get another attempt here. One could answer as Rashi's Hechrich is from Sima Posuk. Rashi knows that it can't be touching, regular touching it, because of the end of the Posuk. Because if all that we're talking about, that this whole Posuk is coming to be Machadish, that touching it would be Tomei, okay, Mele, by Klicheres, we have to be Machadish you that. Why do we have to be Machadish to you, tell you that a Klietz, Tomei by touching, that's Mechalater Kulo, that's always, in all cases, you touch it. So the fact that if the Chiddush is that Hesed, okay, so we're telling you Hesed, this is the new Tuma, moving something is Tameh. So whether you moved a Kli Cheres, you have to break it. If you moved a Kli Eitz, you have to toivel it. But if we are not really talking about a Chiddush, about Hesed, we're talking about just touching, why would you have to repeat? So mainly you want to tell a Chiddush touching a Kli Cheres from the back. We understand, but what do you need to tell us about touching a Kli Eitz? So, Bi Shloima, what you can't enter as Rashi's Hechrich is from Sima Posik, is from the end of the Posik, Chol Kli Eitz Yishut L'mayim, that if it's a wooden vessel, you should rinse it in water. Bi Shloima, Oib Yiga Boy meant Hesed. We understand that Yiga means Hesed. Is moving the Chiddush in the Chol Kli Eitz. So then we understand what the Posik is coming to tell us, the novelty that if it's a wooden vessel, as by Zav is Eich Kli Eitz, Tomei Behesed. By a Zav, a Kli Eitz is also Tomei Behesed. Kli Cheres and a Kli Eitz are all Tomei Behesed. Oy, Baba Yiga Boy meant Kipshute, but if Yiga Boy means to touch it, I feel the Negi Bachayr even touch on the back. When the Posik is the Machadish, what is the Posik coming to novel the idea? As Zav is Metamek Kli Cheres, Duch Negi Bachayr that a Zav can make a Kli Cheres Tomei through Negiah. This is special halacha by Zav. Then we have a difficulty. What's the Chiddush in V'chol Kli Eitz? So why does the Pasuk have to have V'chol Kli Eitz? As a Kli Eitz v'er Tomei b'Negiah ma'achirim, that a Kli Eitz will become Tomei by touching from the back is doch nit kein Chiddush. That's not something new. So why does the Pasuk have to tell us here? But the Rebbe says, we can explain this really in Rashi. If that was the case, Rashi would have quoted in his quote from the Pasuk, or at least hint to the words Chol Kli Eitz. Because his whole proof is because of the Chol Kli Eitz. The Baal does Rashi tutas nit, Rashi doesn't do that. Is a raya, is a heaven, as a haltas nit faraya chocha. He doesn't think that that's a proof as Yigaboy meant Hesed. That how do we know Yigaboy Hesed? Because there's no Chiddush by Kli Eitz. Come on. As the Rebbe will say later on, we don't need a Chiddush in everything. A pasuk can be extra. We'll see. Other as the Rai was a break the message, or maybe it's a better Rai. So we're back to understanding where does Rashi just says Yochel, that you might think that it means touching. He doesn't tell you where you know that it doesn't mean touching. And we can't learn that Rashi means the conclusion of the Teres Kahanim, who says, boy, Rashi doesn't bring it down. It's not mistaber. Also, we can't say that it means the beginning of the Teres Kahanim, in which he says that there's a Kal V'chomer from Tmei Meis, and We can also not, because as the Rebbe pointed out, we're seeing that Yiga is a Chiddush. Why can't we say touching is a Chiddush over Tmei Meis? And we can also not say that because it says in the pasuk later on about that the Kleitz is Yishutav, and there's no Chiddush there, because then Rashi would bring Chol Kleitz. So what are we stuck with? We're stuck with what is Rashi's evidence. Rashi starts off the Rashi saying maybe you touch it, and then Rashi doesn't bring any evidence. So for that we'll see the Rebbe's answer. Hey, das Verstehen Mahagdim Atmiya. We'll understand this by first introducing the question. What are we learning from the pasuk before this one? It says, "V'chol asher yigabay hazav," anything that the zav touches, v'yodov leishotav b'mayim, and he hasn't washed his hands. As Rashi brings down, the Rebbe will bring down in a minute, meaning he hasn't gone to the mikvah. Mikvah requires every part of the body has to be toivel in the mikvah, but not the parts of the body that are not open. That doesn't have to be immersed in the mikvah, which means all the revealed parts of the person has to be in the mikvah, and that's why the pasuk uses the word yodav. Yodav are external, but it means he didn't go to the mikvah. So if anything that the zav touches and he hasn't gone to the mikvah, yodav leishota b'mayim. So then, so then he should wash his matame the garments. Also, so the person who he touches has to wash his garments, and the yoda the rochaz b'mayim, and then the person goes into the mikveh, washes in the water, goes to the mikveh. Tamei Adarav, and it becomes Tamei till the evening. So what is the pasuk? But before this pasuk, it says Vanegei b'bsar hazov. If you touch the flesh of the zav, yichabes begodov, wash your garments, v'rochas b'mayim b'tamei Adarav, and b'tamei Adarav. So what is the chiddush over here? Und der Din, wie Rashi is befarish, as Kozman. So there is a halacha that we learn off from that Yodov Leshotav B'mayim, that basically to say, even if the ziva stops, as Rashi brings down, if you didn't go to the mikveh, it doesn't help. You're still Tamei Zov until you go to the mikveh. So that halacha is technically learned from this pasuk. Let's say, as Rashi says, with the din Rashi is mefarish, as Kozman was like tovel mitumosei, as long as the person has not immersed himself from his tumah, even if he stopped, the flow ceased, and he has counted the 7. So that halacha, we don't need this pasuk. Is aleph kemenes oplanen bitakoshke for the din by yeledus. We can learn this as a foretory from the din of Yeledis, that until a woman giving birth, till she goes to the mikvah, she's not tamei, and the tumah zav is greater than tumah Yeledis. Masmuz havun tefillah, unafila noch tefillah b'chol kodesh leisiga. Even if she immerses herself, it doesn't help. She can still not touch. Ve'ein shimsha marim l'tara achkias achamo shel yom arboim shel lamocher tovis kaporas tarosa. She has to wait to the Tara for her to come until the sunset, until the 40th day, in which she has to bring the kaboras of the Tara. So we know that not going to the mikvah isn't something that we don't know from a Yoledis, that the Zov, if he didn't go to the mikvah, that he's still tamei. We know that. It's a kol came from there. But v'ikeh, to leave them, darti Torah nitimer chazal m'ganze pasuk. Torah doesn't have to repeat the entire pasuk. So when genug zu reinstellen the werte, would have been sufficient to stick in the words v'yodov l'shotav b'mayim, that his hands, he didn't rinse in the water, he didn't go to the mikveh. In Friedrich pasuk, when he gave him sarazov, if you touch the B'sar Zov and you haven't gone to the mikveh yet, then you're going to be tummy to take the din that as long as you didn't go to the mikveh, it doesn't matter even if the Zov is finished. So why do we need our pasuk? Und zu lieb der Tmiya learn take the Gemara. So the Gemara has this extra pasuk. So what does the Gemara learn from this? Those was a state b'chol hashiga b'hazov meant it negia. So the Gemara says that take doesn't mean touching of the zov because we already talked about touching the zov, not hesed. So the Gemara learns that extra pasuk to teach us hesed. Rashi over learned the Teres Kahanim. Rashi learns hesed from our pasuk. As erst the yiga von unser später dicken pasuk, that it's when it says yiga boy from our, which is later, made hesed. Like the kosher late pirush Rashi. So according to Rashi, we have a difficulty. So the vashtet der pasuk v'chalash yiga boy azov. Why do we need the whole pasuk of yiga boy azov? Rashi doesn't answer this question. So we have a whole extra pasuk. It can't mean the halacha that Rashi brings down as the points over there. So what's the purpose of the pasuk? There being in them, the explanation, the simple meaning, there being in them that even according to Pshuta Shel Mikra, can stay a ganze pasuk. There could stay sometimes a whole pasuk. So ein prat was vet this chadish in him between one because of one detail that was vet in this pasuk. From them was amol chazet ibn the Torah. From the fact that we see sometimes the Torah goes over a ganze parsha, a whole portion. Bishvil dovish in chadish bo. She brings down there's a new idea, so we bring a whole parsha. When we say gleich in Parshas Bereshis, we see the beginning of the portion Bereshis. The Torah chazet even noch dem Sipur of Brisot and Bachava. The Torah repeats the story of the creation of Adam Bachava. So live the pratim was kumot zu in the zweiten Sipur because of the details which are added in the second time around. Void and more cases. Und der Far is b'pshuta shel mikra ken kushin it. So that's why it's not a question. The simple meaning of the pasuk. So the was da steht the pasuk from Chol Hashiga B'Azov. Why do we need this pasuk B'Azov? We know it all from the previous pasuk. Because this is because of the added words. The pasuk is v'yodov loishota b'mayim and was learned to Virashi's Messiah b'Pirushay. Rashi concludes in Pirush that teaches us noch dem is mafarish dem pshat. After saying the pshat, so it says there she'ein beis hastorim ton b'ismayim eleiver agolu k'mayidayim. So we have a chiddush over there. So while it could have said in the previous pasuk yodov leishata, but Rashi tells us the halacha that the beis hastorim, things that are not open, don't require in the water. Just the hands. So we have a halach. So basically, what is the Rebbe bringing down this whole shot from the previous pasuk to show to us that Rashi doesn't have a problem if there is a repetition in the pasuk. The Rebbe is going to say the whole kliates now and the kliates that you should bring it into the mikveh. That's not a problem for Rashi. The Rebbe is going to prove, but the Rebbe wants to first show that for one halacha, Rashi is okay with the whole pasuk. And now the Rebbe will explain what is Rashi's proof. Oizvov. When Rashi comes to unser pasuk, when Rashi arrives to our pasuk, was dover schwer. Over here too, we have a difficulty. What is the chiddush in pasuk? So the issue is, what is the pasuk coming to teach us? As a keli ver tome durch negias hazov, that it should become tome by touching of the zav. Kemen wissen bekolshke bekavol chaimer from the friedike dinim. We can know it as a forethought for sure from the previous dinim. As an odom ver tome benegias hazov, that a person becomes tome benegias hazov. As azov is mitama filu b'mishkav Moshe. Even without touching it, if it's mishkav of the Moshe of the zov, he'll be mitama. So why are we trying to tell you here that Negias is metame? Maybe it's coming to tell us that even touching the back. Vibald as the Pirush HaPoshet. For Yigaboy. Is that feel machoidev, since the simple meaning means even from the back. So we can explain as the Chiddush Bashtet in them was Azav is metame b'negia kli cheres, that he will be metame by touching a kli cheres u'me'achoidev. Maybe and from the back, as we said before, maybe that's the Chiddush of the pasuk here. Because otherwise, what does the pasuk come to teach it? What are we going to explain, which the Rebbe argued before about the second part of the pasuk? Is the talking Chiddush that in the center of the pasuk there is no Chiddush. This is what the Rebbe brought down the previous. Is genug was the pasuk to Toifa Chiddush did, not a name prat. The fact that the Torah is just coming up with a novelty just in one detail. As that not only by Kli Eitz, but also Kli Cheres Mitam B'Megiyim Ma'achoyrav. That's the Chiddush, and then it just brings down the din of a Kli Eitz. So here, why would we think so? To add to it, is Rashi says, like it says in Teres Kohanim, which means we're trying to point to the Teres Kohanim that tells us that that there's an idea to say that Azov should be mitam mechoyre bakli cheres. But dort zet mentake as mitzadem chumra from tum Azov. Over there we see that because of the stringency of tum Azov is yesh mokem loymar. There is room to say as there is mitam bakli cheres mechoyre, that it would be mitam bakli cheres from the back. Choch ameis keres lit mitam azay. And yet, there is a svara to say, so maybe this is the Chiddush of it. That's what Rashi is saying. Those haste. So what is Rashi bringing? Rashi is not bringing the proof that you can't from the Teres Kohanim. He's just bringing the proof of Teres Kohanim to strengthen the possibility that you should be able to mitam machor. Those haste, those was Rashi mitzayim from Teres Kohanim. Rashi is referencing the Teres Kohanim, he says, it's not to the beginning of what it says there. Sum limud. As Azov is nit, metame klecheres machoidov, that he is not metame, nor verkehrt, to them seal, to the end, to zweite svore in Hemshech HaTeres Kohanim, which is trying to say that maybe Tumas Zov should be stronger. Ad, as Rashi says, until right before it says Magoah, he says maybe we should say that Azov is metame ma'achoyrov, and that's what I'm saying Yochel. So Yochel is b'teriskenim to show you that there is a svara that it should be metame. As it says Yeda svara Yochel, as I feel Magoah b'ma'achoyrov, so werden Tomei. My time is that the Reif Norman Ramas Durvachulu who brings it in the Beferish. Because if he brings the Beferish, then you don't see what he's, then it looks like that is not the time. We're bringing the Teres Kohanim, that there's a svara for that. So why not Takir? That is from the end of the Teres Kohanim. Over there it says, what is the touching, which is considered like the whole thing? So there has to be a Seitik L'Kama. The Rebbe will point in Zion that the pshat from Koila Yigaboy touching the whole Keilah is Hesed, more than just touching a part of the Keilah. And that's the Rashi, that's why that's what Rashi brings beferish, because from there we see that it's only the movement of the whole keli, but we're not going to come up with this chiddush that you can also be metamek lecheres machorim. That's bore in that. What is the explanation? Zion. Noisif of them was Lached is the ganze Posik Ibrik. In addition, that it would seem that the whole verse is extra. So why would we need the Posik altogether? Which the Rebbe argued before. What is the Posik telling us? So we need the word Asher Boy Hazov, extra, the word Yiga Boy Hazov, touch me. The Posik come by Hevshach Tzufri, the Posik was zokt. Previous Posik it says, whatever he touches. But doch gewen genug es stehen bekitzer should have said, Ukli Cheres Yishover. Talks about touching the zone. If it's an earth, we should bring al derech v'in sima Posik. Chokli eitz yishotav b'mayim. It says it should be written. It doesn't say Chokli eitz. Steht nicht noch einmal Chokli eitz Yiga Boy Hazov yishotav b'mayim. Because we're talking about Yiga Boy. It says in the previous Posik, Yiga Boy Hazov. So the Posik should say, Kli Cheres Yishover. So therefore, it is logical to conclude as the Chiddush in the Posik liegt in die Wörter, that the novelty of the Posik in the words in Yiga Boy. So that's why these are the extra words. Yiga Boy. Yiga Boy means do anayer oifen negia. It means a new type of touching. Nicht wenn the negia versteht früher. This is not the same as the touching before. Torah comes out with Yiga Boy. The Yiga is boy. Touching is boy in the whole keli. And Negi in the ganze klolos hakeli. It's in touching the entire general keli. Und nicht wie gewöhnliche Negi was is in a shetach mitzumtzum von der Sache. On the unusual way, it's not touching a part of the item. Rashi use what is a touching which is as if touching the whole thing? Then I would say the Hesete, that's the movement was durch them. That is not the ganze Kli. The whole Keli becomes moved. So therefore, that's why. So the extra words here in the Pasuk Rashi's proof is Yigaboy. And Yigaboy is more logical that it means movement because it means the whole Keli. If you should learn that the novelty of this verse is in Dembos Aklicheres is Metam Machoyrov. If you should say that, oh, it's different, it's Metam Machoyrov, is the Chiddush not in the Verter Uklicheres. Uklicheres, that Uklicheres, but oder reichen the word boy, aber nicht in Yigaboy zusammen. Not the touching that it's him, that is something only to tell us Hesed, but otherwise, the Chiddush, the din is Klicheres Asher Yiga, not boy. Or Klicheres, but Yiga boy, how does it happen? That happens through Hesed. So basically, the Rebbe says that Rashi says we would have been tempted to say that you should touch it should be metame because Yiga boy is an extra posik. Maybe it's coming to tell us that chiddush. As in the Teres Kohanim, we see there's a possibility that we should say that a zav should be metame akli cheres me'achoyrov. And Rashi says no, because Yiga boy in the posik is more by Hesed. It's a bigger chiddush, and that's how we know that we don't have a chiddush that you can metame ma'achoyrov. It's not metame, but the posik is talking about that you are touching the whole keli. What is the Eroin Avedis Hashem? Ches. The Eroin Avedis Hashem. A klicheres was werd gemacht von Offer. A klicheres that is made out of earth is marumas of mention that she said in Offer. That hints to a person whose basis he comes from Offer. As the Pasuk says, "Vayitzar Hashem Elikim es ha'odom, Offer min Adam." Hashem created the man, earth from the ground. Offer ato gomer, says the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, "You are dust and you will return to dust." So that is Offer. A cheres is Offer is a person. And in them Zokman, over here we say, "As a klicheres vet nitomim me'achoyrov." A klicheres cannot become defiled from the back, which means The matters of this world that become pasted to the body of the person was der guf seine vertongruf nacherev. The bottom is called his back. That's the back of the person. Those things that are connected, paste themselves. They cannot defile, make impure the essence of a yid. Since the Eibishter Hashem created him so, that his body needs to come on to eating and to drinking and to other matters of this world, naturally he enjoys them. And the service is not to break your body. Baal Shem Tov says, you have to help out the body. To make from his body and his portion of the world a dwelling place for Hashem in the lower world. He's not schuldig in them, so he's not guilty in the fact that that matters of this world have attached them to his back. In the end, he needs to be clean from that as well, but it's not his fault. This is only true if he stays as Hashem created. He is an earthenware, was vice the bittel shows on the level of subjugation. If he considers himself a wooden vessel, he considers himself as an overgrown entity. Eitz was waxed like a tree that grows. Or he considers himself as metal. And his heart in his heart in his self as a metal is involved as it is shown in the Ramtzir that is beshapping him. Since he's no longer in the way he was created, then he becomes tam also from the back. One of them is Rashi. So Rashi says, Yochel afilu noga by macherev. The Volk you can't mean. You might think you can be tam macherev as a tumah chamura v'zov, such a serious tumah as zov is metame eden chazusholem that would defile eden afilu macherev even from the back. But the inyan haziva is not an inyan tivi v'dam nido. Ziva is not a natural phenomenon as the blood of the menstrual cycle, nor a choyle aguf. That's the sickness of the body. Dam mereves dam zayim olam. This blood that is more than the nature of the world requires. What does it mean? Transferring this to the service of man. Dam nida is the ravas idom etzateva bayit. Dam nida is the evil which is in the nature of a yid. That's the inclination, the heart of person. Inclination is bad from his youth. That's something which is natural. Dam ziva, on the other hand, blood of ziva is those was megari yitzra'alo. It's when the person teases his yitzhar himself. That is more than the yitzhar confuses him, interferes with him, interrupts him on his own. As the chinuch language is inyan haziva, the idea of ziva. Yikra ba'odam b'tzeisu mederech hayoysher ba'asmod machol v'cholu. The ziva will come to a person when he leaves the normal path in a regular way by overeating and overdrinking, etc. The riber wollt man gekent meinen. So one could therefore think, as in dem fall werder mensch klicheres. In that case, the klicheres, the person comes to mafil macherev even from his back. Bald as fall durch in azara, since he fails in such an evil, bad, which isn't brought out forced because of the nature of man. Them zog the teres koinim, v'Rashi. So that teres koinim Rashi says is nitazoi. It's not so. But the negiyas hazov is magoi shehu kikuloi. If the zov touches all of it, as written in Klolus Odom, that it touches the general person, ken der klicheres tome venafil macherev. Then he can be tome even from the back. You moved it, everything. But just a touch, I feel it from a zav, even if it's from a zav, can it only in the Metzora from Ayid that cannot touch the essence of Yid. Sagdin Rambam, the Rambam rules As a fila yid was medafim koifer sein zu tun mitzvah, even a yid which has to be forced to do a mitzvah, is as the kefiyah, this that they have to force him nor mitzvah achitzonis. It's only because of his externality. Yitzro shetokvei. His yetzer has overpowered him. But eich dam is b'pnei yusei roitzelis miYisrael. Innerly, he wants to be part of the Jewish people. Roitzu lasis kol mitzvahs, who wants to do all the mitzvahs. Durch that kfiyah, and through this forcing verta rabginom avok, that removes the dust. This is machase mailin, which covers and obscures of the rotzen amiti from the midden on the two true will of the yid. As vert negala the emes Hashem, the truth of Hashem is revealed into the world. Ayid zokt reitzani. Ayid says, I want. It doesn't say I don't want because of the cover. Cover is removed. He wants. Lis Yisrael, be part of the Lasis kol mitzvahs, to do all the mitzvahs. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Metzora, Tovshin Lamed Vav.